Good morning, everyone. The time is 9 a.m. I call to order the September 14th, 2023 meeting of the Contractors State License Board. I am Diana Love, the board chair. Today, Mary Tigard and Jacob Lopez have approved absences, and Alan Guy will be here a little bit later. He is stuck in traffic. Vice Chair Mike Mark, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mariah, can you please call the roll?
Diana Love.
Present.
Joelle Barton.
Here.
Rodney Cobos.
Here.
David De La Torre.
Here.
Miguel Galarza.
Here.
Amanda Gallo.
Here.
Susan Granzella.
Here.
Alan Guy, absent. Jacob Lopez, approved absence. Michael Mark.
Here.
Stephen Pinelli.
Here.
Jim Ruane.
Here.
Mary Teichert, approved absence. We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome a new board member, Joelle Barton, public member, appointed by the Senate Rules Committee in June of 2023. Joelle, would you like to take a couple minutes to tell us about yourself?
Well, thank you, Diana. Yeah, I currently serve as the Business Manager Financial Secretary of IBW Local Union 11 in Los Angeles, and I'm also the Secretary-Treasurer of the California State Association of Electrical Workers. I have 47 years in the construction industry, both working in all aspects of the electrical trade, and as a native Los Angelino, I look forward to serving along with my colleagues, my esteemed colleagues on this board, and thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, and welcome to the Contractors State License Board. And next, I would like to recognize and congratulate Carol Gagnon. Effective today, Carol is the new Chief of Licensing. Carol has 17 years of experience at CSLB and 9 years as manager of the Examination Development Unit. Welcome, Carol, to your new role. We will now take the opportunity for the rest of you here at the table to introduce yourselves, and I will start with myself. I am Diana Love, board chair, public member, and I represent a senior organization. And I'll turn it over to Dave.
Good morning, David Fote, Registrar.
John Kinn, DCA Legal Affairs.
Michael Mark, I'm Vice Chair of this board as well as the Chair of the Legislative Committee. I'm a Planning and Development Director for Sheet Metal Workers Local 104. We cover the entirety of Northern California.
Yafana Lamar, Chief of Legislation.
Steve Pinelli, Director, I guess. Committee member.
Jim Ruane, the new Chair of Enforcement. Great to be here.
Steve Grove, Chief of Enforcement.
David De La Torre, Board Member.
Joelle Barton, new board member.
Mike Jemneski, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Mariah Rovera, Executive Analyst.
That's good. Amanda Gallo, board member.
Rodney Cobos, board member.
Carol Gagnon, Chief of Licensing and Examinations.
Catherine White, Chief of Public Affairs.
Miguel Galarza, Secretary and Chair of the Public Affairs Committee.
Susan Granzella, public member and IT Advisory Committee.
Thank you, everyone. And is there anyone in the audience that would like to come up to the microphone and introduce themselves?
Hi, everyone. Yvonne Durantes, Assistant Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations with the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, going forward, next is Agenda Item B, which is for public comment and requests for agenda items for next future meetings. The board values public input as part of our consumer protection mission. To allow us enough time to conduct our full schedule of business today, I'm limiting public comments to 3 minutes apiece. If you have any comments, don't involve an item on today's agenda. This would be the time where you can make them. If you have comments on one of our agenda items, we'd encourage you to wait until we get to that item. We'll give you an opportunity to make your comments at this time. There are a few other rules that apply. First, California law prohibits board members from discussing any matters brought up during public comment. Also, we're not allowed to act on any item not on today's agenda. If you want the board to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda of a future meeting. And finally, if you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you do not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. That's because board members may be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in the case. At this time, are there any members of the public who wish to address the board or offer a possible agenda item for a future meeting?
Good morning. My name is Phil Vermeulen. I represent the Flasher Barricade Association, American Contractors Indemnity, and I also am president of Contractor Licensing Center. We license in all 50 states. Something that came up yesterday in my licensing side, it happens all the time, and I've spoken to the registrar about this as well as the deputy registrar. And that is, we had a client that called us, the qualifier of the license dropped dead suddenly, and this happens a lot. And all of a sudden, the family is stuck. Yes, there are provisions in the law and all that, but it causes a lot of upheaval. Recommendation that I'd like to see placed, and also with the sunset review report coming up, this is possibly something you might want to talk about as well in there, is allowing a backup qualifier on licenses. It would bring extra revenue to the board, and it would also help a lot of contractors out there. There is no downside as far as I can tell, and it's something I think we should be looking at. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Sorry. My name's Davi Rodriguez. I've been here before, but it's been a while. I wanted to just mention a couple of things here. I've been in communication with the board about unlicensed contracting relating to public art and the municipalities that have been hiring unlicensed contractors. I recently saw that the board did put something on the website to make the public, aware of such a thing. And I want to appreciate that. It's baby steps and all, but it is something. I also wonder, how valuable it's going to be, because as soon as you published that up there, I saw a couple of cities, again, enter right into contracts with unlicensed artists to install public art. And I warned them about that in writing, and bottom line is they don't seem to care. They charged ahead and awarded the contracts anyway. And I see that you had conducted a sting just a few weeks ago, and you arrested an unlicensed painter for a contract for like $700. Meanwhile, the unlicensed artist who's painting murals or what have you, they're giving contracts out in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and nothing happens. Now, I turned in to the board 5 different unlicensed contractors. So it's been a couple of years when it first started out this, and the board went and saying, they cited one of them, which was the smallest amount too. I wonder what's up with that, but when that unlicensed contractor that you arrested goes to court and all this, he is not going to tell anybody, hey, I got arrested by the board for unlicensed contracting. Most people just shut the hell up. They don't want anybody to know about that. But you don't get much value out of this. Nobody knows that there's a license law if you don't really make publication of this and make a point of it. Now, if you go and arrest some artist that is contracting with a city entity for a few $100,000, believe me, that's going to make an impact. They're going to make some headlines out there, and word will get out. So I just wonder, though, if the board members in this room have the political will to do something like that. We're talking about, the city of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg. I went before him, and for Christ's sake, this guy is a lawyer. He chaired the Business and Professions Committee while he was in the state legislature. And I pointed out what he was doing was illegal, and he didn't care. So they're so intertwined with the artists that they choose, they don't care whether they have the proper credentials to do the work. They just want it to be done, and they want to pay them. So I'm asking to take a second look at this thing and see what value can actually come out of this in the long run. Thank you. And again, thank you for doing what you did, putting that up on the website. That was a big deal. Good start. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving forward. The next on the, excuse me, let me go back. Are there any board members that have any items they'd like to put on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the next agenda item. Item C, presentation of certificates of recognition. This is a standing agenda item. You may have noticed that we have individuals in the back of the room that are continuing to come in. I'm very pleased to recognize today there are approximately 31 staff members from the CSLB licensing division, specifically from the various licensing application units. Collectively, this team has worked over the past several months to bring application processing times from 6 and 7 weeks down to 1 and 2 weeks. According to the executive division, these units have averaged 3 weeks or higher the past 10 years and have only dropped below 3 weeks once in the past 9 years. There has not been a significant change in the number of incoming applications over the years, so this is truly an impressive achievement. We want to bring them here today to acknowledge them in person for their fantastic work. Due to time constraints and because I do not want to mispronounce any names, we will not read off the names individually. However, all names are prominently displayed on the screen behind me. I will now read the certificate acknowledgement that you will each receive. This certificate is in recognition of your outstanding work, reducing application processing time to approximately 1 week. On behalf of licensed applicants and California consumers, the Contractor State License Board thanks you for your exceptional performance. Please join me in showing our appreciation for these hardworking licensing staff. Okay. Do any board members have any comments? Okay. Carol, do you have any comment? Oh,
No worries. So, thank you, staff. Sometimes I know you don't get a lot of gratitude, and people are normally just complaining that things are taking too long. But as a contractor for 30 years, I know how tough the job can be, and I deeply respect the efforts that you've done and continue to improve the performance. So bravo, well done, job done.
And Carol, do you have any comments?
I do. Thank you guys so much. You have done incredible work. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work, team. You make us all proud. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to take a group photo, so I'm going to call for a brief recess for about 5 to 10 minutes so that we can take a photo. And I would like to ask Mr. Guy, who I'm glad traffic allowed you to get here just in time, just in time, to join us, Dave, Carol, and Mike Jameski, to join us in the photo. I believe we're going to go out in the lobby. So we're going to take a quick break. Thank you. It is now 9:25 a.m., and I'm going to call this meeting back to order. We are now on agenda item D1, the review and possible approval of the June 22nd and June 23rd board meeting minutes, which begin on page 10. Before we do that, I would just like to thank Robin Williams. I believe he's sitting in the back of the room. He's been with us a couple of years, and he prepared the minutes for us today. Thank you, Robin. So let's take a look at the minutes for June 22nd. And do any board members have any edits for the June 22nd board meeting minutes? And if there are no edits, I'm asking for a motion. And for those who do a motion in a second, please state your name for record.
Through the chair, Jim Ruane, motion to approve.
Okay, Jim, and a second?
Alan Guy, second.
And is there any discussion of any kind from the board? Are there any public comments? If none, Mariah, can you please call roll?
Diana Love.
Approved?
Joelle Barton.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo.
Aye.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Jacob Lopez, approved absence. Michael Mark.
Aye.
Stephen Pinelli.
Abstain, I was not there.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you. Now, let's take a look at the June 23rd board minutes. Are they together? Is the approval of the June 22nd and 23rd one together?
One, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Next is the Registrar report. There are 3 items in this portion of the agenda, A, B, and C. I want to begin by congratulating Registrar David Focht for being sworn in August 30th as President of the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agency, or referred to as NASCLA. NASCLA has a national membership base of 41 state members, including the U.S. territory of Guam, the National Construction Authority, Nauru, Kenya, and over 150 associate, affiliate, and business members. Business members include many multi-state contractors. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Love. I'd like to begin is by providing an update on the contracting with consultants that the board directed staff to pursue. You may recall last June, I reported that we were entering into contract with Cooperative Personnel Services to perform a workload and process improvement study. What this is we're going to take a look at our investigations, how long they should take. Do we have enough resources to handle the number of complaints that we're receiving? I'm pleased to report that the contract was approved in June of 2023, and staff are currently working with CPS to provide them historical data, but also to meet for interviews. So our staff will have the opportunity to meet with CPS, to be interviewed, have a real understanding as to what is involved in conducting an investigation, to look again at whether or not we have enough investigators or consumer service representatives to handle the workload, but also are there opportunities for process improvements to make our investigations a little more efficient. So that is well underway. And some more good news about that, the board approved spending $75,000 for that consultant CPS came in $7,000 less, so we came in a little less than what the board approved. The second consultant was identified to research the scope of unlicensed practice. That's been an unknown number for forever here, really. How many unlicensed contractors are there, and do we have enough resources to be effective in combating unlicensed activity? With a focus on disaster-related complaints and also declared disaster areas, need to make sure we have the resources that we need to be effective in addressing predatory contractors that come into declared disaster areas. We initially were looking to hire a university to perform that work. We were not successful. That's something I did report in June. What's now happened is we have a request for proposal that we did submit to the Department of Consumer Affairs in June. That we call it an RFP, was finalized this week, and we anticipate it being released to the public tomorrow. So the qualifications that we're looking for is that somebody would have a 4-year degree or higher in business, economics, law, public administration, or related field, that they have professional research experience, and that they have authored or co-authored a government or college or university study or report or something similar. So again, we anticipate that being released tomorrow, so I'll have more information in December as to hopefully the consultant that's been hired to meet that need. If there's any, do you want to ask for any comments for that?
Okay. Are there any board comments? Any comments from the public?
Okay, so moving on to agenda item D2B, and this is an update on NASCLA. Just for some historical reference, I've served on the NASCLA Board of Directors and the Executive Committee for the past 6 years. Prior to being sworn in as president, I served as secretary and vice president. It's provided me an opportunity to recommend consumer protection initiatives. And I look at my involvement with NASCLA as being one as to how does it benefit the state of California? How does it benefit this board? And in many ways, I think it does, and I wanted to share some of the initiatives that I've been involved with over the last couple of years. One is establishing a national license database. You know, the thought is, for states that license contractors, we should have a database of those licensees. It's a tool that can be used for 2 reasons. One, if you're vetting an applicant and they have been licensed in another state, you could quickly verify that. So you could verify they were licensed in Nevada, Arizona, wherever it may be, but also to have a disciplinary database. Again, this is public information, but we do need to know if somebody has been revoked in another state. It works well for other states to know that we've revoked somebody here in California, something that our staff are finding very effective. We're processing an application to check the NASCLA database, see if there's been any disciplinary action related to that applicant. So the National License Database, California was the pilot for that. Now it consists of 8 states. We've got a ways to go. But, you know, it's an IT lift, so you have to have IT to transfer the data. And Jason Perez is our IT chief. He's not here with us today, but he was instrumental in getting that set up. So we do have 8 states participating. Second thing we've been involved in, and thanks to Steve Grove, our chief of enforcement, we've been working with NASCLA and 11 other states, and we worked with them last June in performing sting and sweep operations targeting unlicensed contractors. So, you know, real effective way to just emphasize the danger unlicensed practice causes to the public and look for ways to be effective in addressing it. This last operation last June, NASCLA identified with the various states, 1,002 contractors are out of compliance. They did a nationwide press release. For California, we had 90 legal actions for unlicensed practice and 37 for no workers' compensation insurance. We got a press release out for that, but it's really looking at it on a national level, just emphasizing the benefits that licensure brings to the public and to the industry. And just one other thing, just to kind of get you up to speed on, is Hawaii. As you know, Hawaii had horrible wildfires, and one thing NASCLA does is it enables enables me to meet other executive officers, and we do share best practices. So I was able to reach out to Candace Ito. Candace is the executive office for the state of Hawaii, officer for their board. And we have a meeting with her next Tuesday. So she was real excited about the opportunity to talk to Steve and our supervising peace officer, Amanda Martinez, and me on Tuesday to talk about what we experienced with the Paradise wildfires. You know, what laws were effective, what weren't, what strategies can we use to try to deter predatory contractors for coming into the area. So just moving on to the next thing was videos. It's different when it's fascinating in interacting with other states, but they don't always look at things the same way we do. I was talking to Phil and others about it. In California, we're fortunate because there's a lot of support for consumer protection, for keeping the profession clean, if you will. And so we want to emphasize the benefits that licensure brings, and we also recognize that solar is posing a problem in most states. You know, there's a lot of solar complaints. One reason why we're receiving so many complaints here is because we're receiving more than 200 solar complaints a month, and this is something that's troubling. So what can we do to educate consumers? You know, we want to educate the industry, but we also want to help consumers protect themselves. So this was something I really thought NASCLA should focus on. They supported it. It's developing a public safety announcement regarding solar. You know, what are the tips that a consumer could use to not have a bad experience? Most solar contracts are done well with no problems, but there are some that are not. But also, what are the benefits of licensure? In California, this isn't such an issue as it is in some other states. They don't always appreciate regulation. So I think we really need to take a step back and look at the benefits licensure brings to the public and to the industry. So we're going to show two very short videos. They're NASCLA titled right now, but they have agreed to rebrand them as CSLB. Thought is, if you're in support, we rebrand them. We can put them on our website. I also have a meeting on Monday with the National Solar industry, and I'm going to ask that they also distribute the solar one or put it on their website. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We have a good relationship here in California with CALSA, the California Solar Association, but we need to get this out nationwide because we really got to focus on what's happening in the solar industry, and we've talked about it before. And a lot of the problems relate to the front loading of the contracts, not having understanding of the energy savings. Can you really afford to go solar? So if we can, let's show these two videos. They're only about 2 minutes apiece. I don't know if we need to move out of the way here.
In many states, building contractors must be professionally licensed to provide their services to the public. The primary reason for contractor licensing is to protect consumers by ensuring that the work performed meets basic safety standards. Licensing also protects property owners from liability, and it provides consumers with a streamlined process to resolve any complaints that may arise during the project. The benefits of common sense contractor licensing extend beyond individual property owners to the wider public, including supporting local communities and economies. Some of the public benefits of licensing include protecting property and infrastructure, maintaining consistent industry standards across practices, avoiding costly litigation, promoting fair competition, and providing a clear path of opportunity for job seekers. But most importantly, contractor licensing helps build trust in the industry. From general contractors to electricians, roofers, plumbers, HVAC installers, and others, licensing helps professionals forge relationships that support and protect communities and strengthen local economies.
Before considering a switch to solar power, you should know what your options are and how to protect yourself from potential scams or fraudulent practices by solar energy companies. First, consider if solar power is even right for you. Like any major home decision, review your finances before shopping for a solar system. Check for applicable funding or tax credits from local, state, or federal sources. Determine your required solar system size by evaluating your annual electricity bill and current kilowatt payment. Consider how long you plan to stay in your home. It will take a number of years to recoup in energy savings the money you'll pay for your solar system. Assess your roof's age and orientation for southern sky exposure and unobstructed views for maximum energy generation. If your roof is more than 7 years old, you may want to wait to install solar panels until re-roofing to get the full value. Once you've made the decision to move forward with solar energy, be aware of solar energy scams. Some solar energy companies make false claims about the benefits and savings of their systems to convince homeowners to sign up. Use high-pressure sales tactics, such as limited-time deals, to pressure homeowners to make a rushed decision. Offer leasing options that promise low monthly payments and guaranteed energy savings, when the actual savings are lower and the lease terms are unfavorable. Use substandard or outdated equipment, potentially leading to poor performance and safety hazards. Scammers may pose as legitimate solar energy companies to collect personal information for identity theft. Be cautious of companies asking for large payments up front. Generally, down payments are no more than 10% of the cost of the work, or $1,000, whichever is less. The best way to avoid these scams is by hiring the right contractor. Deal only with state-licensed or registered contractors by checking with your state's regulatory agency to make sure the contractor is properly licensed to install a solar energy system. Get at least 3 written bids and make sure the bids are all based on the same work and material specifications. Ask the contractors for 3 references so you can verify that customers are satisfied with their work. Get your contract and any changes to the contract in writing. Make sure it specifies the work, materials, the company that will do the installation, and installation details with a payment schedule and completion timeline. Limit down payments to 10% of the work cost or $1,000, whichever is less, and only pay for completed work and delivered supplies. Check your state's laws for upfront payment limits, and don't make the final payment until you're satisfied with the completed work. Make sure your contractor pulls all the building and electrical permits before work begins, and that inspections are completed before final payments are made. Confirm warranties are secured upon completion of installation and detailed in the contract. Hiring a licensed contractor to install solar energy in your home ensures safety, quality work, compliance with regulations, warranty protection, and peace of mind. For additional resources, start by checking at your state contractor licensing and registration board, as well as other sources that can verify information.
I just want to say huge thanks to Catherine White, our Chief of Public Affairs, for helping with that subject matter, so thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open it up to the board for discussion, and I'd like to start out by saying that I think it was a very well put together videos for us to consider. Does anyone have any comments?
I'll make a comment. That's great that you showed that on the solar installations, because as you know, the importance of it, not only the financial aspect of it, but also the safety aspect. We have to make sure that a qualified contractor installs those, because the minute those panels are taken out of a box, they produce electricity. So it's a safety issue. You have to make sure everything's installed correctly. Plus, for first responders, once the installation's complete, they have to know what they're up against if there's a fire, God forbid, and they have to shut down it. So it has to be, thank you for bringing that, and it is very important as we strive to more solar. You know, we want to get energy independence and clean energy, so this is of utmost important to us. Thanks.
Through the chair, where will these be available for view for our contractors associations and other related?
So NASCLA is they're gonna promote these nationwide. They have resources for that. For California, what I'm suggesting is that we would make those available on our website, and that Mike was helpful in scheduling the meeting with the National Solar Association. We're also going to be with the California Association and see if they will distribute it to their members or make it available on their website as well. So it's all about getting the word out.
Through the chair, is there any plan for these videos to be translated eventually?
Tremendous idea, and I can recommend that, absolutely.
I think it would be good to have, I think the payment terms are our state law, but it says, 10% or $1,000, whichever is less, but check what the state law, if they could, I don't know if we can amend it to just say what our state law is, so people don't have to go look it up.
That was a controversial issue in developing the video because most states do not regulate the payments, believe it or not. And so, yeah, see what we can do with that. But we're able to get that in the video where we talk about it being 10% or $1,000, whichever is less. But an example in Arizona, they don't regulate payments at all. They believe that that's a decision that the two parties need to make. So
that is our payment.
yeah, ours is 10% or 1,000, whichever is less. So that is in there.
It
Yeah.
is, but it'd be good to say, if we could delete the comment about check with your state law, that is our state law.
Okay. Got it.
To the chair. Dave, is it possible to get those videos out to building departments throughout California and have them intertwined with them so they can actually put them out there?
Absolutely, and we have a good relationship with Calvo, and we'd work with the California Building Official Association and see if they could distribute those for us. Absolutely.
Because I know I can talk to my department and see if they would grab that and put that out there, and then they could do that with the Public Utilities Commission as well, and DPW, and just have it where it's just available so they can actually see it and have that video on there. Anything helps, so that'd be great.
Anything helps, and any ideas on how we can get that solar video to consumers before they enter into contract would be so helpful. We would eliminate a lot of complaints if the contractor got paid after the consumer was satisfied with the work performed instead of before the work is done.
Yeah, through the chair, talking about getting it out there, social media, Instagram, stuff like that. I know that's one of the first things that I check when I get up in the morning, so.
And I just have one comment based on what Mr. Guy said. Because we work with Nevada, would we not leave in what he wants to take out about looking at another state law for that 10%? Wouldn't we now leave that in because that's a different state?
Yeah, I think what Member Guy recommended is that we be specific about that payment schedule as it relates to California. So the question is, could we add that to the video?
Okay. Just put the word California behind it?
Yes, yes.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments
I
from?
have one comment. Is that the final cut of the video? Yeah. I just know with ever-changing demographics, my opinion, the video is just a little bit too long. If we can cut to the point, board member David Delatorre mentioned Facebook, YouTube, but it's way too long for something like that. 1 minute and less would be a heavy hitter type video in the future. Thanks.
Anyone else from the board? Any public comments? Okay. At this time, would any board member like to make a motion to rebrand the NASCLA video with the comments that were taken into consideration to as CSLB videos to post on our website?
Board Member Kovos, I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Oh, let me turn it up.
Second.
Please state your name for the record.
David Delatorre.
Diana Love. Joel Barton.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos.
Aye.
David De La Torre. Miguel Galarza. Amanda Gallo. Susan Granzella. Alan Guy.
Aye.
Jacob Lopez, approved absence. Michael Mark. Steve Pinelli. Jim Ruane. Mary Tykert, approved absence. The motion passes.
Thank you, Mariah. Next on the agenda is item D3, which includes our budget updates and statistics summary. For that report, we'll turn to our board's budget manager, Stacy Paul.
Thank you, Board Chair, and good morning, everyone. The budget update begins on page 48. This page summarizes the final budget expenses from last fiscal year, 22-23. CSLB had an authorized budget of $80 million, and the final year-end expenses came in at $74.3 million. In addition to the authorized expenditures, the board had an additional $6.3 million in mandatory external cost. The final revenue collected was $95.5 million, which ends the fiscal year with a budget surplus of $14.9 million. The year-end budget surplus is placed into the fund, and when added to the beginning balance, which was $9 million, we have a total reserve balance of $23.9 million. On the next page, the top chart shows last fiscal year 22-23 final budget and expenses through year end. Nothing too exciting to report. We spent 93% of our budget. The chart directly below shows our final year-end revenue. Overall, we ended the year higher than projected at $95.5 million, which is 16% more than prior year. If you flip the page, this chart is our fund condition. It projects out to budget year 24-25. The middle column is current year, where it shows our beginning fund balance of the 23.9, which I mentioned. Our projected revenue for this year is $90 million, and directly below that is our projected expenses, with the external cost showing $85 million. We anticipate a steady revenue at current fiscal year end, increasing our reserve balance to hopefully 4 months in reserves, which is approximately $29 million. On the next page, this is our construction management account fund condition. CSLB has already submitted the necessary documents to the department to authorize an increase in grant disbursements for this fiscal year. We requested an additional increase over prior year grant total disbursements from $175,000 to $225,000 due to the growth of the fund, and as annual contributions continue to increase. We should have a final outcome if the Department of Finance approves this request at the next December board meeting. If you flip the page 52, you'll see our governor's budget for this fiscal year 23-24. It shows our preliminary budget at $78.5 million with an authorized position count of 425. Keep in mind, this does not include the extra external costs that we have to pay out of our fund. Lastly, let me quickly touch on the statistical summary, details on the last 4 pages. At fiscal year end, we saw increases in new applications and HIS registrations, slight drop in issuance of new licenses, but keep in mind that is comparing to extremely high year in fiscal year 21-22 when we had to play catch up due to exams being shut down due to COVID. So further, a recent increase in applications will be discussed during the licensing update later this morning. And renewals appear steady for the second half of last fiscal year and appear to be increasing the first 2 months of this year. This is the budget update, unless anybody has any questions. Yes, Susan?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, again, I want to commend you on the reserve, because we were looking at a very desperate, wasn't a great picture way back when it was less than $1 million. So I'd like to commend you, your staff, and senior management for putting us in this position. And thank you. And we're looking forward to December's report on PSI.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, this is an informational item. No proposed action is required from the board at this time. Thank you, Stacy. We will now go on to item D4, our administration update. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to announce the retirement of CSLB's Chief of Administration, Mike Maliza, whom many of you know from his board meeting updates on CSLB personnel and facilities the past several years. Mike's last day in the office was September the 8th, and he received a well-attended send-off at CSLB headquarters, complete with a plaque presented by Registrar David Foat. Mike was unable to attend today because he is doing some well-earned traveling. On behalf of the board, thank you, Mike Maliza, on your over 10 years of service to CSLB. I will now turn it over to Chief Deputy Registrar Mike Jemneski, who will do the administrative update in the absence of a Chief of Administration.
Thank you, Chair Love. I'll try to do the update justice for Mike Maliza. If we could trouble you all to turn to page 58, that begins the administration update and the update on personnel and facilities. So page 58 breaks down the number of personnel transactions for the past 2 fiscal years. Now, you heard in the budget update that we have 425 allocated positions for CSLB, and I think what's significant to report in this update is actually the vacancies, which begins on the top of page 59. We are pleased to report that we are down to 30 vacancies, which out of 425 positions, that's about 7%. That's really impressive. We try to stay at around 10, and we're down to 7%. And the last time we were that low was a month before COVID started. We had a time during COVID when we were up to 13, 14% vacancies. So we like to think that we can attribute some of this success in filling positions to our recruitment efforts and how we've kind of changed how we get the word out about vacancies at the board through different channels and participating in different job fairs and getting the word out. So that's a pleasant update for our personnel and recruitment. On to page 60. This just breaks down the statuses of our active leases and our contracts that are in progress or executed. Not too much to report here. You did hear about 2 of the contracts that are pending earlier in the registrar update. That's for 2 of our consultants. The administration division does work with the control agencies to get those executed. And then if you move to page 61, really the only thing to report here is training, but we should highlight that the administrative division, they track all this statutory required training for all the staff. But this bullet here at the bottom for training does not capture the full picture of how much we involve our staff with training, whether you'll hear about it later in the enforcement division. We did the enforcement academy, or when managers ask their staff to complete specified training for their job to develop skills. We do a lot of training. So what you see here is not the full picture. That's just what the administrative division tracks. But that's really it. It's a short administration update. And through the chair, back to you.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or comments? Do anybody in the public have any questions or comments? Okay, this is an informational item. No proposed action is required from the board at this time. Now we will go to item D5, information technology update. Before I turn it over to the IT Advisory Committee board member, Susan Granzella, I want to take a moment of personal privilege to, first of all, I want to thank all of you that are members of the board for the knowledge and growth and mentorship that you have given to me as I have grown in learning from this board. But I want to especially thank Susan Granzella for her mentorship and her friendship along the way, who has given me the guidance to be where I am today to sit before you as the board chair. And she gave us a scare today. She initially stated she would be traveling and unable to attend this meeting. And Susan hasn't missed a meeting in over 7 years. And I know how heartfelt that would be for her. It would have been devastating if she had missed this meeting. So I want to thank you, Susan, and I'm very pleased to see you here today, and thank you for your mentorship and your friendship. So at this time, Susan, please present the IT update.
Okay. Hard act to follow. Thank you. I've also been on the board longest of any of the board members, and it's been a pleasure to work with new members. But I didn't want to miss the meeting, your first meeting, and also they now have web, access on planes, and I thought it would be rude to just sort of watch the meeting on a plane, so I wasn't going to do that. So anyway, thank you very much for your words. So thank you, Board Chair Love, and good morning, everyone. And on page 63 begins the Information Technology Update. Our Chief of CSLB Information Technology Division, Jason Perez, is on vacation this week. I am not. And as a member of the IT Advisory Committee, along with our new board member, not so new, board member Amanda Gallo, I've been asked to deliver the update since he's in Cancun, and for this important aspect of CSLB service. So while this is not everyone's favorite subject, fortunately, we're here at the beginning of the meeting rather than at the end. But Amanda and I have talked about this extensively. So we met with Jason before he left. We're living, and part of this are his words and what we wanted to add to this. It's very important. We were just talking about social media and getting word out and accessing. So on business modernization, we're living in a rapidly changing technological world, and we've made significant strides in updating our technology foundation to enhance operations. Recent developments in this area have included the development of the cornerstone of business modernization, cloud integration. And we did have a moment's discussion about having to explain cloud, but I think everyone understands the concept by this time. By adopting cloud services, we've been able to significantly reduce costs and at the same time enhance our operations. We're in the initial phase of this transformation, focusing on a comprehensive review of our contractor license application process and methodology. It's really one of the basic things to start with. This includes a major shift from paper-based systems to an online platform. It's essential to engage both paper-based, internal and external stakeholders at this stage to align our modernization goals for the future. We're currently evaluating vendors to help us move this process online. We have 3 that they are discussing all of these options. The IT Board Committee, Board Member Amanda and I requested a separate update and monthly meeting with Jason Perez, the chief, and we plan to present the cost, risk, and benefit of these options. These are significant options, and we will have those together, we think, for a motion at December's meeting. That's a big task, but we think Jason, who will be rested, is up to it. Information technology security update in line with State of California's cybersecurity strategy plan, also known as CalSecure. We're continually improving our cybersecurity capabilities for both internal and external data. We're also working alongside the Department of Consumer Affairs, transitioning the advanced IT service management solution that keeps everyone informed in real time, that's stakeholders, our team, and even the public, about the status of their IT requests. Always important. We're also advancing our efforts to manage security awareness, which was just mentioned about the training. Every single member of CSLB staff is required to undergo security training. It's not just a compliance checkbox, it's a cornerstone for improving an environment that is conscious of security risks. We cover everything from data protection to password management. So the next part is communication infrastructure, and this is actually, I'm an old IT person, I think it's exciting. The communication is the bedrock of any successful organization, and to make our communication more seamless, we're migrating from the existing VoIP phone system to Microsoft Teams. Many of you probably encountered that when we've been logging in or working with CSLB. It's more than just a phone system, it's a complete cloud-based communication suite that fosters collaboration and productivity. I think everyone at this point has used Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, and we know how important that is. With Microsoft Teams, we're converging on a single communication hub, eliminating the need for separate phone and conference systems. The transition for headquarters is already complete, and our remote offices are next in line. Over the next few months, we'll be closely monitoring this transition, resolving any issues, and providing ongoing support to staff. We'll provide an update on this important implementation at the December meeting. And the more exciting part is to kick off, it's a new project that is starting this month to revolutionize the call center operations. If you currently call in, you're using a system that's at least 20 years old, and we'll be migrating to Amazon Web Services, AWS Connect, and transition from our current call center. It has limited fault tolerance capabilities. So when we go to Amazon AWS Connect, that means we're able to provide redundancy with services 24/7, 365 days a year. Big deal. And I think it's put in to improve operational efficiency, enhance customer experience, scale with ease, and integrate advanced analytics. The project kicks off this month, September 2023, and we're aiming for full implementation by December 2023. Again, we'll have a full report on that. It's a major leap forward that replaces a 20-year-old system, and it will have significant benefits in the long run. So we will see you in December with all of the things I just promised, even while Jason's on vacation. And that's the end of our IT advisory report.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions from the board? Any questions from the public or comments? Seeing none, this is an informational item. No proposed action is required from the board at this time. Okay. The next item is item D6 regarding the board's upcoming sunset review. The content for this item is in a handout-only form and not in the packet. You should all have the handouts in front of you. I have a few comments on this item, but I will turn it first over to Registrar Folk.
Thank you, Chair Love. Just for some background, sunset review requires each DCA board and bureau to be reviewed by the legislature. CSLB was last reviewed in 2019. Marla Richardson was the chair at that time. That review went very well. The legislature was very supportive of our consumer protection efforts, and CSLB received a maximum extension of 4 years. That was subsequently extended an additional year because of the COVID pandemic. So where we're at now is we need another extension. If we don't receive an extension, we would become a bureau. So it's very important that we have a report that we can submit to the legislature, and we need to meet their deadline. And that deadline is January 4th of 2024. This is a board report that we're developing. So it's staff providing the background, but we have involvement of board members. We need involvement of board members to make sure that this report is from your voice. This is what you're wanting to submit to the legislature. Now, initially, when we were scheduling this meeting, the plan was to provide a verbal update. I'm going to let others talk about where we're at as far as the questionnaire and the answers that the legislature is looking for from us. We did discover, though, after the advisory committee met on September 5th, that we were farther along than we had thought. And so a couple of staff, they burned the midnight oil, if you will, and they put together this legislative handout. So huge thanks to Fauna Lamar and Mr. Williams in the back, Robin Williams, for putting this together. And I think this packet was actually completed last night. So nice work. I do apologize for you not receiving it early. As you all are aware, the goal here is to make sure that you receive all board meeting material a week before the board meeting. But I just want to emphasize that there are no voting items as it relates to this, the sunset review itself. This is informational only. This is to give you some material that we can use today and also that you can consider for a future meeting. Because our goal is on December the 13th at that board meeting to submit to provide you a final report for your approval. That report will need to be approved on December 13th so that we have 2 to 3 weeks to format it and meet that January 4th deadline. So again, this isn't to vote on, it's just to provide you some information. And again, thank you to those of you that really worked on putting this together and getting it to the point that it is today. So back to you, Chair Lev.
Okay. Thank you. At the June 2023 meeting, in my capacity as board chair, I appointed Board Secretary Miguel Galarza to join me on a two-person advisory committee to work with staff on the development of the board's Sunset Review report. Miguel and I met September 5th to discuss prior sunset issues and new issues. In a moment, I will ask Chief of Legislation Fauna Lamar to discuss the prior sunset issues and the Sunset Report questionnaire. After Fauna provides her update, I will request board members and public comment. After the discussion, I will then ask Advisory Committee member Miguel to discuss 5 possible new issues, and then Fauna discuss 3 additional new issues, which the board has previously considered. At this time, Fauna, please provide an update on the prior issues and responses to the Sunset Report template.
Thank you, Chair Lev. I believe board members Granzella and De La Torre are the only ones who were board members during the last Sunset Review, so I want to give some quick background before I cover the prior issues. There is a Sunset Review process summary on page 3 of your handout. That's for your information. And then I am going to quickly cover the components of the Sunset Report so you can see what the prior issues that I'll be presenting and the new issues that Board Member Galarza will be presenting. You can see them in context. So leading up to the Sunset Review by the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions and the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development, collectively known as the Joint Sunset Review Committee, CSLB completes the questionnaire. The Sunset Questionnaire begins on page 5 of the handout. After we submit the complete report, the committees interview the registrar and selected board members, and they then write a background paper, which includes issues to which we need to respond in writing, and the registrar and board members will provide testimony in a public hearing in front of the joint committees. That will likely be in March. The background paper includes specific questions specific to CSLB, and it also includes questions that are asked of all programs going through Sunset this year. So page 6 through 20 of your handout are questions 1 through 67. Those are the template questions that are asked of every program going through Sunset. So every program will need to answer these questions. They cover program operations from administration, licensing, enforcement, testing, and they also include other areas like workforce development, COVID response, and other items. At the bottom of page 20 is our response to our prior issues. The prior issues are the CSLB specific questions, and those are what are asked in the previous Sunset Review's background paper. So the responses to these questions are very important because they're the questions that the legislature wants to hear from us about our program. So I will I'm sorry. And then the new issues, which will be covered by Board Member Galarza, those are fully formed legislative proposals. These are issues that we identify and that we would like the legislature to address through our sunset extension bill. So a bill will be introduced after the hearing, and they will include some of our legislative proposals. They might also include their own ideas of what changes need to be made to our Practice Act. They also might include items that are introduced by the public. So the new issues are what we would like them to address. And then the last section is attachments. Those are things like performance standards, organizational charts, and things like that. So I'll go to the new issues. Sure.
When you met with the advisory committee, you were able to go through the prior issues in about 15 minutes. Are you going to do that for us this morning?
I'm going to try.
Okay. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I just said new issues. I'm going to cover the prior issues. These are lengthy. It's 46 pages, and they're made up of 5 sections. There's the issue that the legislature, it's the question that they want us to answer. There's a background that gives context of why they're asking that. There is a committee staff recommendation. Those are questions that they want us to answer in our response to the question. So we have slides for the question and the committee staff's recommendation for each, and they'll be up on the wall because this is a lot to look at to make it easier. And then we have our previous response and our current responses in blue to allow you to review these easier. So I'm going to summarize each issue quickly. Okay, the first is staffing challenges. Essentially, they want to know our staffing challenges and how they impact operations. In the background, they discuss staffing issues in the context of concern about licensing workflow and complaint workload and disaster response in the Enforcement Division. The current proposed response is on page 24. We discuss difficulties filling vacancies common to all divisions and provide an update on complaint data and participation in disaster recovery centers. We also discuss the increase in solar complaints, specifically because the increase in those complaints is a large portion of our increase in overall consumer complaints. That data is on page 26. Additionally, there was a sharp increase in hours worked on disaster response. So there's a chart in there on page 26 for that. For the licensing division, we discussed implementation of SB 216. We realized unanticipated and non-absorbable workload resulting from implementing that bill. So that is creating a staffing challenge for us. Unless there's any questions or comments, I'll move to issue 2. Okay, so the second prior issue is around a board quorum, whether we have a difficulty in meeting quorum. Since we have never had to reschedule because we could not make a quorum, this is not an issue for us. This is a straightforward response. Issue 3, the legislature is asking how we are able to implement so many bills that affect us each year with our limited staffing resources. So essentially, we start by discussing the role of each division in implementing legislation, and then they ask about difficulties or anticipated problems. So for that question, we discuss IT. Most bills affect IT, and most don't have a delayed implementation date. This does not allow IT to submit a request for resources for positions or even a contract for temporary help. So they end up absorbing a lot of bills that they shouldn't. And it equates to about $372,000 worth of workload that they absorbed in the past 5 years. And the other issue with implementing legislation I just mentioned is SB 216. The licensing division is concerned that the issues that came up in implementing workers' compensation insurance for the 4 classifications this year, they're concerned that those problems will remain and be on a larger scale because we're implementing for all classifications January 1, 2026. Are there any questions about that one? Okay. Issue 4 is, on page 32, this is a question about our fund condition. During the last sunset review, CSLB's fund condition was close to achieving a structural imbalance, and the Joint Committee wanted to know what CSLB is doing to reverse that. So we discussed that. We talked about the fee study and fee increase. Since then, CSLB implemented a fee increase through legislation. The new fees are commensurate with the work performed to process an application. So we have since increased our reserves, as Stacy reported, and our fund is considered healthy. Issue 5. This begins on page 33. This is about pro rata. So during the last sunset review, it was discovered that DCA exceeded their pro rata, which is, pro rata is where all programs within DCA contribute a percentage of their revenue to pay for DCA's centralized services that they provide to all programs. So they are not supposed to exceed 10%. This is something in our Practice Act. During last sunset review, it was found they exceeded that 1 year, so the legislature asked. And so there is a table with that. There was 1 year where the pro rata payment exceeded, it was 11%, and that was due to a last minute shortfall in revenue based on projections because of COVID. Any questions on the pro rata? Okay, issue 6 is exam pass rates. So pass rates are considered low compared to other DCA programs. So the joint committees wanted to know why we think that is, and they want to know what we're doing to improve the pass rates of our applicants. The proposed response includes several factors that contribute to low pass rates, including applicants who require a translator. The quality of their exam is as good as their translator, so that makes it difficult for them. So to address this issue, we have the testing unit. Carol has, her unit has translated the top 10 exams for which a translator is requested into Spanish, and they've been launching those on a flow basis since August 1st. So you'll see in the response that there's a highlight where I want to add more information closer to the submission deadline so we can see if we've noticed any positive results from that. We also translate test preparation materials for all exams into Spanish. And we noticed another primary factor in the low pass rates is that those who do not pass usually fail multiple times. So this artificially lowers our pass rate. And only 56% of our exam fails are first-time test takers. 44% have taken the test multiple times, some as high as 8. So for those folks, we're revising our study guides each year. We also use test questions that do not count towards the overall grade, but they're pre-test test questions to make sure that the question is relevant, that the test taker understands it, and that it's appropriate to ask for the trade so that new questions don't contribute to an exceedingly high fail rate. Any questions on this issue? Okay.
I have.
Sure.
Michael Mark, I think the test rates, it's something where we want to make sure our licensed contractors understand the materials. So a low test rate might not necessarily mean the same thing as, like, let's say in high school or for test rates. Obviously, we want to make sure the contractors are educated, but part of it is we want to make sure as a consumer protection agency that the persons who are taking the test and passing the test are actually know the material for all the codes. So I think this is something that if it's an issue from Senate and Assembly where they're looking to make sure that how are we going to increase the test rates and the passage rates? Why are they so low? It's just part of the industry, in my opinion.
So the issues I discuss are the outliers, the segments where we see exceedingly high, higher than the average fail rate. So this is why we're trying to address those, in case there's any inequities that we can fix. So I can add a statement to make that clear.
Yes, and I think just if it's just a kind of a generalized question during the review process, it's just kind of make sure we hit on making sure that we want to make sure the tests we're not trying to lower the standard of the tests to make sure, we're just making sure that the tests are for that particular classification as high as possible because it's for consumer protection.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Issue 7, licensing and certifications. This begins on page 37. The joint committees are asking how we determine when certifications and classifications should be updated. So we discuss that we conduct occupational analyses every 5 to 7 years. We also give other examples of when we realize that there may be a need for a change. So we give meeting consumer needs and the B2 license type as an example of that. Another factor is technological advancements, and we discuss BESS as an example of that, and evolution of industry. So there we talk about hazardous substance removal certification, where we see the need for more debris removal, especially in disaster areas. You'll see a highlighted section or paragraph there. We plan to hold a stakeholder meeting, so I will update that response after that meeting. Any questions? Issue 8, enforcement priorities. This one is straightforward. The joint committees asked how we prioritize our enforcement cases. The board approved a revised prioritization criteria in May 2019. Sorry, this begins on page 40. We include that revised criteria and discuss the rationale for why the board chose the criteria that it did. Any questions on that one? Okay. Issue 9, beginning on page 45. This is regarding disaster response. The joint committees want to know how we work with other agencies and redirect staff to participate in disaster response to prevent fraud. The proposed response discusses the revised disaster response plan, which was revised between enforcement and the Public Affairs Office to place a greater emphasis on enforcement's involvement. We also discussed working with Cal OES and FEMA, and through our working with them, we received a $1.3 million reimbursement for our participation in those disaster recovery centers. So that was thanks to work by our budget manager, Stacy Paul. And we also discussed updated outreach materials, how the B2 license can provide an additional license base for work in disaster areas, and board partnered legislation with Senator McGuire. This bill is going to be decided today by the Senate. So that is also highlighted because we don't know the final disposition of that bill. Any questions on disaster response? Okay, issue 10, workers' comp. On page 49, they're asking, should everybody have workers' comp? We respond, yes, and we made that happen by SB 216. So that is a straightforward response, although lengthy. It just discusses 216 and how that's going to be implemented. Issue 11, tree worker safety. This begins on page 53. The joint committees asked whether CSLB should be authorized to take disciplinary action against a tree service contractor for safety violations when a death or injury are not involved. After the sunset review, the board sponsored legislation, AB 2210 by Aguiar Curry, to make that a reality. So we currently have that, and we are no longer asking for language. Issue 12, this is Breeze. Board member Granzella discussed this issue in her update. The committee and Jason Perez, our IT chief, are currently in search of a licensing and enforcement platform. We hope to have an update by published date of or by approval date of the board meeting or of the sunset report, so we can insert that then. Issue 17, this is on page 57. The joint committees ask if we want technical changes. This would be technical, clarifying, non-substantive, non-fiscal, non-controversial changes that would usually be in an omnibus bill. Of course, we're going to have those. We always find things that could be clarified. One of those is something that the board already approved, which was removing the requirement for qualifiers to submit a duty statement. That was amended into Business and Professions Code 7061, and the board approved that at the June board meeting. Any questions on that one? Okay, issue 14. This is regarding LLC application processing times, and it begins on page 58. In the last sunset report, CSLB requested a change to the contractor state license law to allow insurance providers 45 days to submit liability insurance, which is required for an LLC to obtain a license. The joint committees wondered what CSLB has done to encourage applicants to meet the existing application requirements in a timely manner. This is no longer an issue because our amazing licensing division has made this no longer a problem through cross-training and working with the Secretary of State's office and working with insurance providers. LLC application processing times are the same as any other application. Any questions? Okay, issue 15, we're almost done. Unsatisfied judgments begins on page 60. The issue here is regarding unsatisfied judgments, and CSLB had at the time during last sunset review, had authority to suspend a license when a contractor has an unsatisfied judgment against them. When that happens, the qualifier or personnel of record are prohibited from serving in those roles on another license. However, when a judgment is entered against the qualifier and the contractor is not named in that judgment, the contractor's license stays intact. So they did not address this with the sunset bill, but Mike, previous ledge chief, was able to get this into SB 610 by Senator Glazer in 2019, which in that bill closed that gap in our authority to suspend a license when they're party to a unsatisfied judgment. So that's the response to this one. Issue 16, at the time of this last sunset review, CSLB was requesting that a permissive fee in the contractor state license law, at the time it said CSLB may charge a fee up to $20 to enforce Labor Code Section 108, which requires electricians to be certified. During the last sunset review, CSLB requested that the CSLB may charge be turned into shall. So that was eventually done also by SB 610 by Senator Glazer, so we now charge that fee. I give that background, and we just ran out of time. We're pulling data to fill out that question, so that will be also updated when you see this next. And issue 17, should the CSLB be extended? Their recommendation was to extend us. Our response this time is yes, please extend us again. And those are the prior issues. Are there any questions or does Chair Lev call for comments? Sorry.
Thank you, Fauna. Before I call for questions and comments from the board members, I just want to summarize what you just said for my recollection, since I'm the one that's going to have the privilege of sitting in that chair in front of the legislators, answering questions. The 67 questions are prior questions, and they are asking us for updates to those 67 questions, correct?
No, the 67 questions are template questions asked of every program that's going through Sunset Review. So that'll be the first part of the report, and then after that is our response to prior issues,
Okay.
which is what I just discussed.
And then we have 17,
We have 17 of those.
and then we have 8 brand-new issues. Is that
New
correct?
issues, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments from board members?
Yes, I have a comment. Your first report to the board, wow. That was long for, an established board member or staff, but the clarity and the way you deliver the information was appreciated. Thank you very much for doing that, and again, welcome to the position.
Any other board members have comments or questions?
Through the chair, so are we going to be discussing new issues next?
Yes.
Possibly? Okay, and there's no packet information on new issues, or is that the next?
No, we don't have a write-up for that yet. I was concentrating on trying to get the prior issues written, and many of the new issues are still being researched. Right. And we also wanted to get board feedback on the new issues before we, okay.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, I will continue forward. At this time, I'm going to request Miguel Garza to introduce the 5 new issues for consideration in the Sunset Report.
Thank you, Chair Love. The new issues section contains legislative proposals that the board would like the legislature to resolve during the Sunset Extension Bill. On September 5th, myself and Chair Love met with staff to discuss these new issues for inclusion in the Sunset Report. So in no particular order, the potential new issues we discussed and those with staff are currently researching include the following. First one is to allow applicants and licensees to submit workman's comp insurance policies directly to CSLB. Currently, the Business and Professional Code Section 7125 requires that insurance providers submit workman's comp, certificates of workman's comp insurance directly to CSLB. Licensees would benefit by being able to submit proof of workman's comp directly to CSLB. This restriction became a problem when SB 216 by Senator Dodd, which required all C8 concrete, C20 HVAC, and C22 asbestos abatement, and D49 tree service contractors to have certificates of insurance on file was enacted. During this implementation, duplicate and incomplete and late submissions created problems despite of our outstanding staff. Created problems for licensees, including license suspensions and substantial workload to resolve. That is the first item. The second item is the expansion of the HAZ, which is known as the Hazardous Waste Removal Certification, to include debris removal and excavation in disaster areas. Cleanup is one of the most urgent needs for a consumer during the rebuilding after a disaster. debris removal in a declared disaster area can impose significant health risks and safety concerns. CSLB's current hazardous certificate only applies to removal of underground tanks and hazardous sites that are noted on specific government websites, but does not include residential wildfires or flood disaster sites. Expanding the scope to include hazardous material certification for debris removal in declared disaster areas would be of great benefit to the public health and safety. The next item is setting the floor for administrative fines. The Office of the Attorney General has reported that an appeal citation hearing at administrative hearing cost to CSLB is approximately $9,000, far greater than the potential $100 penalty. However, the CSLB law does not prescribe a minimum statutory fee. The minimum fee is set in the regulation for most violations at $100 and has not been raised since 2007 to keep pace with inflation. These factors lead to considerable reduction in administrative fines on appeal, even when the citation is affirmed. The next item is requiring the applicants to pay PSI directly when multiple examinations are required due to failures. Currently, the fee study establishes that CSLB application fee does not include the cost of PSI to administer the exam. In fiscal year 2022-2023, 41,487 exams were administered. There is no limit as to how many times an examination can be taken, and staff are not proposed to do that. CSLB has been paying approximately $50 per exam. CSLB is proposing that the licensed applicants pay PSI directly. And the last item is authorizing CSLB to require a licensee to reimburse CSLB for the cost of sending out an industry expert to educate the licensee on the work and the need of correction or completion. And this has become an issue when contractors receive multiple complaints about workmanship and are cooperative, but there are no questions about how to bring the work up to industry standards. In resolving these cases, CSLB incurs the cost to secure an industrial expert inspection. Currently, CSLB can only recover investigative costs by filing a formal disciplinary action known as an accusation or suspension, or revoke the license. CSLB should be able to recover these costs directly from non-compliant contractor without the requirement to file a formal accusation. Those are the 5 new items that we have that we're going to request in the sunset bill. Are there any comments from our board members or questions on any of those specific items? Yes, Steve.
I was going to ask that we go through each item one at a time and see if the board or the public has any comments or discussion. Item number 1.
Which is?
Item number 1, which is allowing the applicants to submit workers' comp insurance directly to CSLB.
Any board comments?
Will the insurance company still submit as well? Is that just to expedite it? So it's 2 copies of the insurance policy goes into the board then?
Yeah, you have the mics on, but a lot of the workers' comp carriers do file directly electronically, and so that still would work very well. As for those that may use a broker that doesn't file timely, that we would allow the licensee to file directly. So just all about keeping the license current, trying to give better service to the industry. But we would still encourage the insurance companies to file their workers' comp policy electronically.
Any other board member have a comment on item 1? Does the public have any comments? Okay, go ahead.
Back to Board Member Guy's question, Would this unfortunately might put the onus on the contractor if there isn't that still that requirement or insurance companies submitting on behalf of the contractor?
Yeah, again, if, for most contractors, they're going to want it to be filed electronically, so it's done real time. The problem, though, is if you don't have a workers' compensation insurance policy or an exemption on file, your license will be suspended. And so we have situations where licensed contractors cannot get their policy filed electronically or otherwise by their insurance carrier. That's a problem if they go under suspension. So we're just providing them an avenue. It's not that we'd ever encourage this as a business model, but we'd like to have the ability to accept it directly from the licensee to keep their license active.
Any other board comments? Now we'll go to the public. Any comments from the public on item number 1? Okay, we'll go to item number 2.
And item number 2 is the expansion of the hazardous waste certificate to include debris removal and excavation in disaster areas.
Comments from the board?
Excuse my ignorance, but so that current classification that would usually do that type of work is what? And then and make sure I'm hearing correctly, it was for hazardous materials and disaster zone, declared zone would be the expansion, correct?
Yes, it's actually a certification. So I'm going to give you an example. When the Paradise wildfires occurred, contractors came in to do excavation. They had to remove contaminated soil. They were expected to burrito wrap it, and they had to transport it to a landfill. Our current certification only applies to the removal of underground storage tanks. So in Paradise, these are residential projects. There's no underground storage tanks. It would apply if those sites were listed on the Department of Toxic Substance Control's website. They aren't. I've never seen one, so they're not listed. So this is actually something that came to us from industry, and specifically in Butte County. They're saying we have contractors that may be out of state or unqualified, subjecting the community to a health and safety risk. They're not certified. They've not been, they've not demonstrated they know how to do this type of work. And the certification that we have today, it's of no real value. So what we're suggesting with this is that we're going to have a stakeholder meeting, because we know there's a lot of contractors and members of the community in Butte County that were very concerned about the removal of this contaminated soil. And to see if they're still in support of expanding our current certification requirement to declare disaster areas, to removal of toxic substances, because it doesn't do that today.
Any other board comments? Any comments from the public? Item number 3.
Item number 3 is the request to increase, currently CSLB, when there's an administrative hearing, it costs $9,000 to CSLB, which doesn't relate to the $100 administrative penalty that can be imposed. So the request is to change that paradigm and to keep up with inflation.
Any board comments or questions?
What would be the recommended fee be raised to?
Well, that's something we're going to have to take a look at. I know we were looking at the Consumer Price Index maybe being a good place to start. And I don't know, I'm going to ask Mike Zimneski, he's good at statistics, if you have any thoughts regarding what we'd look at. I can just tell you as the person designated to review the administrative law judge proposed decisions, it's really troubling to see that we have contractors that will appeal a citation, and they'll do it, and they'll get the civil penalty reduced to the bare minimum. We don't have the resources here to take disciplinary action against every contractor when we do it. The penalty's got to be significant. We're not even trying to offset our costs here. We're just trying to say that if the average cost to appeal a citation and have it heard is over $9,000, and we have administrative law judges reducing civil penalties down to a couple $100, that doesn't work. That doesn't help the industry, it doesn't protect the public. But Mike, do you have any ideas on how we might establish what the minimum should be?
Yes, it would certainly be by the CPI, and we would look at, I believe, Board Member Galarza mentioned that the floors were last set in 2007. So the CPI calculation would be, what is the minimum for the violation? If it's $100 in 2007, what is that today? That would be one way to do it. And the real issue here is that the fees there's a maximum in statute, but there's not a minimum in statute. So if we could set the minimum in statute, we could avoid the ALJs, dropping down the minimum to the $100, which is in regulation. The alternative is we do all the minimums in regulation, which is a huge lift. We have to justify each one, and it's just a lot of work. It would be easier to do it in statute. We have a floor and we have a max. Our max is no problem. It's the floor that is hitting us. So we would look at the last time they were raised, do the calculation, what is that value today, and justify it that way. Fauna, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it. Thanks.
Any other board comments or questions? Any comments or questions from the public? Then we'll go to item number 4.
Item number 4 is for the public to pay PSI directly for the multiple examinations required due to failure versus it coming out of CSLB's budget.
Any board comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, item number 5.
Item number 5 is to authorize CSLB to require the licensee to reimburse CSLB for the cost of sending out an expert witness to review work that needs correction and/or completion and to make that determination.
Board comments?
To me, it sounds like you're looking for a survey fee. Would that be more of the gist of what you're trying to get a hold of there? Because the corrections have already been given to them, and now you're going out there and actually doing it as a survey and walking through that particular area?
If I could comment on that. What we're experiencing today is a dramatic increase in consumer filed complaints and pending complaints. And so we've taken a hard look at why is this happening? And in many cases, it's happening because we have large contractors that are routinely receiving complaints. And when a complaint is received, we send out a letter to them telling them, you have 7 days to resolve this. You need to take care of your complaint. Well, unfortunately, we have contractors that don't take care of their complaint. They wait until we're investigating it, and we have a choice. We could, if we send out another contractor, the board has an industry expert program where we have licensees that are willing to give back to their industry by going out and doing an inspection and writing a report. We pay on general, I think, Steve, about $700 for this. Well, if we tell a contractor, you have a complaint, I'll just use roofing as an example, the roof is leaking, and we send somebody out and we find that you didn't roof it, install that roof appropriately, we could take an administrative action at that point. Now, where we're at, though, is we have contractors that are doing literally hundreds of jobs. And I'll tell you, Steve and I had a meeting, I won't mention the contractor, it was fascinating. We had 40 open complaints against this contractor. And I said, we are routinely sending industry experts out to your job, and then when the report comes in, you say, absolutely, I'll take care of it. I'll reimburse the money or I'll go out and fix it after we've sent an expert out. What I told him is, you pay approximately $350 a year for your renewal fee. We're getting $3 to investigate these complaints. This is not working, okay? So what Steve has been doing is developing like memorandum of understanding with some of these contractors that if we have to send somebody out, you're gonna reimburse us $1,000, I think it is, for our costs to send somebody out to tell you how to do your job. as an alternative, we could file an accusation. We could file an accusation to suspend or revoke the license, and we could settle that with a disciplinary order, and we can obtain our investigative costs. But right now, we looked at other DCA boards and bureaus and saw, well, they could charge for the industry expert inspection. We would like to have the authority to do that. We're trying to look for different strategies to reduce these complaints and hold these contractors accountable. There are some multi-state contractors that are receiving a lot of complaints, and we might have a difficult time revoking them when they're willing to take care of it, but they should be reimbursing us for our costs to send somebody out to tell them how to do their job. Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, just unfortunately, we're being overwhelmed with complaints right now. And so we just need to look at ways to get these contractors to stop using us as their quality control, basically is what happens. So.
Any other board comments? Any comments from the public? Okay, and item number 5.
Oh, I thought we did item 5.
Oh, was that?
That ends my report, Chair Love.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment, there are 3 more items that Fauna will be discussing. All of the items are for discussion only purposes. No vote will be taken. And before I turn it over to Fauna, I am going to give us a 5-minute break. See you back at 11:01.
Very good, very good.
or a joint venture. Sounds like the mic's just turned on. Or if the majority of the partners, officers, or managers are the same. So CSLB doesn't have a way to tell whether or not ownership claims on percentages is accurate, so we are looking into revising that section to make it more clear to us, to qualifiers, and to our licensees. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, just I know that Phil Vermeulen's here, and there's also the qualifier bond component that we would look at as part of this review.
Okay, the second one is the cash in lieu of bond issue. This was also presented at the June board meeting, and the board approved it as a legislative proposal. This would clarify that CSLB is not responsible for attorney fees in civil cases where the licensee submitted a cash in lieu of bond to the board. CSLB is prohibited from paying the cash in lieu of bond until ordered by the court. And in the Carton case, which we discussed at the June meeting, the court treated CSLB as a surety and decided that CSLB was responsible for attorney fees in that case. This proposal would just clarify the legislature's intent that CSLB is not meant to be responsible for attorney fees in these cases. Is there?
I think you misstated. You said CSLB was held responsible, but it was the surety in the Carton case.
Oh.
That was held responsible. CSLB is looking for a change in the statute to prevent that from happening to CSLB.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that. The CSLB is a regulatory board. We're not a surety. We don't sell bonds. We have no authority to make a good faith payment on a bond. So I don't believe the Carton case itself it applies to the CSLB at all. We can't pay out unless a court orders us to pay out. And when a court directs the board to pay out, we always pay out. We always have. But what we need this legislation for is that there are situations where an attorney may not agree with what I just said and file a lawsuit, and then we have to defend it. So the purpose here is not to suggest in any way that the CSLB is a surety company. It's just to make it very clear that we're not responsible for attorney fees because we're mandated by statute to hold a cash deposit.
And after board approval in June, I did discuss this proposal with the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. They agreed that this is an issue, however, it was too late to get this into legislation for this year. They recommended that we put it into the sunset report. And the last one, I'm presenting this one because I serve a dual role as the tribal liaison for the Department of Consumer Affairs. Licensing of tribes and tribally owned entities is an issue department-wide. Any program that issues a license to businesses should be able to issue to a tribally owned business. However, the way our laws are written, that is not allowed. And in my role as the CSLB Chief of Legislation, I would like to make that happen. We actually had a tribe that applied for a license, and we were unable to issue that license because of the restrictions in our law. So the primary concern is that the contractor state license law defines contractor as a person who undertakes or offers to undertake, and then defines contracting. The contractor state license law defines person as an individual, a firm, partnership, corporation, limited liability, association, or other organization or combination thereof. Tribes are governments, so they do not fit into any of those entities that are within the description of a person. In addition, our Practice Act requires all applicants to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. As governments, tribes are not required to register their businesses with the Secretary of State. They register their businesses with the federal government. So we would need a couple of amendments to enable us to license tribes. There are 109 recognized tribes in California, so this would be a limited, there wouldn't be thousands, there would be 109 maximum. And that's the last new issue we have.
Just to reiterate again, this is an informational item only. No proposed action is required from the board at this time. Do any board members have any comments or questions?
To work on tribal land, do you have to have a California contractor's license?
No.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Any public comments or questions?
Good morning again. I'm Phil Vermeulen. Let's see. First, 7068.1 that Fauna spoke about with the possibility of currently now, as Fauna had mentioned, a maximum of 3 licenses that a qualifier can have unless they have a sole proprietorship. But that's another matter. I'm not going to go down that hole. 3 licenses. The first, the qualifier can have a 0% interest in that company that he's licensing, or if he has, but he has to provide a qualifier bond. If it's over 10% or over, that he has ownership, and all it is a number on the application, then he doesn't need a qualifier bond. For the second and third license, the license board now requires that you show 20% ownership as the qualifier for the second and third. The problem is, it's just a number on a box. The board doesn't verify that. So being in the licensing business, I can tell you, people hold their nose and write 20% down, and that's the end of it. Our proposal has been, and my client, American Contractor Indemnity / HCC, is in support of this, that in lieu of writing down that 20%, they can have a qualifier bond. And we've got to work out all the logistics, and we'll work on that during the interim. But if you would provide a $25,000 qualifier bond, then you could do that in lieu of it. We have, in our licensing business, many starting up companies, small contractors, that don't have the experience necessary to become a licensee, so they'd like to have a qualifier, but because of that 20% requirement, they're getting an SBA loan. The SBA requires that you have 100% ownership of your company, so they are prevented from being able to become a business because of this requirement. So this would be, either or. You have a choice. If you are 20%, then you could not have to have the bond. However, this is another tool. So this is what we're hoping to work on during the interim. Next thing I want to talk about is the Carton case, which, again, because of American Contractors Indemnity, this was a court case that went to the appellate court, and the surety lost. And because of that, it became case law. And so now there are many attorneys out there that are starting to challenge the $25,000 max bond. And in the case of the Carton case, it was over $100,000, I believe, that the surety ended up having to pay out because of the language as it's currently written. So we are in strong support of addressing that. Mike had written some comments to the surety industry, the association, about the license board. My client is in support of that in terms of it's not just the license board. There are auto dealers and there's myriad other types of bonds out there that my clients provide. 3.
You're at 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Had you done this, I could have been a Roman soldier.
Through the chair.
Beers.
Through the chair.
But anyway, so we're in support of the Carton case. The last one, fauna. Aren't Indian tribes federally recognized? Would that not preempt them with the state law?
only does if they're working on tribal or federal land. So if a tribe owns a construction company, there is one that tried to get licensed with us, and they want to be involved in the undamming of the Klamath River, which is something that they helped facilitate. It's the largest
Right.
undamming
Right.
of a river in American history.
Right.
And because the dams are off, they're not on federal land, they're on state land. They cannot work, they can't
I see.
actually work that project. And they also are asked to work on many disaster recovery projects. They have engineers on staff, but they can't work off reservation or off federal land until they have a license.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other public comments? Okay, thank you. Before we go on to item G, the registrar has some comments.
Thank you, Chair Love. So we really appreciate all of your input, and our plan is to now develop these 8 potential new issues into what we normally would have as like a legislative proposal, and bring them back to you at another meeting before December 13th. Now, we received some good news yesterday, and that is that Governor Newsom signed, and I believe it's Assembly Bill 143. And this provides for remote meetings until the end of 2023. So we can have a remote meeting in November where you'll have the opportunity to look at these new issues when they've been vetted, so a little bit more developed. And you can tell us if you're still in agreement so that they can be put in our final report for your final review and approval on December 13th. So that would ideally be a remote meeting with only 2 agenda items, public comment, and the sunset review report.
Thank you, Dave, and I have agreed to hold that we hold that virtual meeting if there's no objections from any of the board members here today. Seeing none, we'll make that happen. Thank you. And thank you, Fauna, for your report as well. And next item is item G, legislation. For that, we turn to our Legislative Committee Chair, Michael Mark.
All right, thank you, Chair Love. So we will begin the legislative agenda with agenda item E1A. So within the board packet, there's been some updates, and there is some new handouts now. So members of the audience, there are some new handouts. I believe it's on the back table. So E1A, review, discussion, and possible action on 2023 pending legislation. An analysis of agenda item E1A, Assembly Bill 143 by the Committee on Budget begins on page 69 of your handout. And that's the new handout in front of us. This bill was going to be presented for the board to consider taking a position, but the bill was signed by the governor last night. That's what Registrar Quote was just talking about. This bill adds a section to the General Business and Professions Code to create a registry of contractors who are licensed by other states who are active members of the military and stationed in California. As well, this bill also amends the Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act and amends the Labor Code to facilitate the apprenticeships for women in construction, as well as the portion on remote meetings. I'm going to hand it off to Fauna.
This is my last section, I promise. So I was originally going to present AB 143 for the board to consider taking a position, but like Legislative Chair Mark said, this bill was signed by the governor, so now the presentation is informational only. So this is a budget trailer bill. That means that there is an accompanying bill in the Senate Bill SB 143. That's the legislation that was actually signed. And because it's a budget trailer bill, it goes into effect immediately upon signing. So this bill allows extends the ability to have remote meetings until December 31st, 2023, and that's what Dave just spoke about. It also allows for portability of a contractor's license in another state for active members of the military who are stationed in California. This would just create a registry of those who are licensed in other states, and we would recognize them as a licensee for the purposes of while they're stationed in California. And the third thing this would do is to allow apprenticeship programs to benefit from the Women in Construction Priority Unit of the Department of Industrial Relations. They have a grant program, and so this amendment to allow apprenticeship programs to participate in the priority unit's resources it's a technical change. So these are the primary things this bill would do that impact us. And that was just an update. This bill is signed and is effective immediately.
Thank you, Fauna. And I would like to just add that better known as ERICA grant from the Division of Apprenticeship Standards has been a great tool to bring women into the trades, change the culture, which I know this entire board believes in, and making sure that we're trying to get more women into the trades. We've got to change the culture. Is there any board comments on this particular bill? Seeing none, is there any public comments? Okay, we will move on. And so next, we're going to take the agenda out of order to discuss a bill that the staff is requesting the board reconsider before presenting the bills that only have a status update. The next bill we are going to discuss is E1E, which is SB 544 by Senator Laird for review, discussion, and possible action. This bill was significantly amended, and staff is recommending the board take action to affirm or revise its position. A revised analysis of SB 544 is in your handout beginning on page 71. At our last board meeting in June, at that time, this board took a support position. This bill would have indefinitely permitted remote meetings as long as certain requirements were met. This bill was amended to add a sunset date of January 1st, 2026. Additionally, SB 544 was amended to remove the concept of entirely remote meetings, which have been extended to just the end of this year. Fauna, can you please discuss these amendments?
Okay, the board took a support position on this bill when it was presented in June. At that time, it would have allowed remote meetings. It would have extended that indefinitely. This bill has been amended a couple times, and the final version is now, the status location has been updated since last night when we published this. It's now in the Senate on concurrence to vote on the amendments that the Assembly put into this bill. So those amendments are to not allow remote meetings. However, individual board members can participate remotely. In order to do that, there has to be a physical quorum at the posted location, and then the individual members beyond the quorum can participate remotely without posting their location or, so at least that is still protected. I wanted to bring this back to have the board either affirm your support position or to, if you want to change your position, give you that opportunity because this bill was so substantively amended. The motion that was approved in June was to continue support if the bill is amended as long as the concept of remote meetings is intact. That is no longer intact. So I'm submitting this for your consideration.
Thank you, Fauna. So the staff recommendation for this bill is now neutral. Is there any board member comment on this particular bill? Seeing no comment, any public comment? Seeing none. So is there a board member motion to change our recommendation to the staff recommendation of neutral on this particular bill.
Susan Granzel, I'll make the motion.
Joel Barton, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to change our recommendation on this bill to neutral. Can we get a roll call?
Diana Love. Aye. Joel Barton.
Aye.
Rodney Cobos.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Amanda Gallo.
Aye.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Jacob Lopez, approved absence. Michael Mark.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you. And so the remaining legislative agenda items are bills the board considered at its meeting on June 22nd, 2023. Because none of these bills were substantially amended, there was no action required. However, there has been a change in location of each bill since the meeting materials were published. Please refer to the revised update on page 73 and 74. Fauna, can you please present the status of each bill?
Hi, okay, so on page 73, you'll see it goes out order B, C, D, and then it skips E, which was 544. So the first bill, AB 336 by Assemblymember Cervantes, that bill would require us to post the top 3 workers' compensation classification codes by payroll on our website for each of our licensees. That bill, the location has been updated. It's now on, it was presented to the governor yesterday. So it has cleared the legislature and it is now with the governor. The next bill is AB 1204 by Assemblymember Holden. This bill would prohibit specialty contractors from subcontracting to 2 or more subcontractors unless those contractors have employees or are party to a collective bargaining agreement. That bill was presented to the governor on September 12th. It has passed the legislature. The next one is SB 601 by Senator McGuire. That has cleared the Assembly and is now back in the Senate because the Assembly amended the bill. Those amendments would narrow, this bill originally proposed to extend the statute of limitations for aiding and abetting unlicensed contractors from 1 to 3 years, and the original language would have done that for all programs under DCA. The Assembly amended that to only apply to contractors. They also removed the elevated fines, and they instead, the bill would now instruct the courts to impose the maximum fine for housing and home improvement contracts when those violations are in declared disaster areas. So those amendments will be voted on by the Senate today. Today is the deadline for the legislature to pass all bills, and their hearing, their floor hearing starts at 1 o'clock. So this will change in a couple hours again. And the final bill, this is our board-sponsored bill. There were no changes here other than the status. Just here to announce that our board-sponsored bill was signed by the governor and will be effective on January 1st. This bill will allow us to require email addresses if available at the time of original licensure or renewal so that we can communicate with our licensee base more effectively, and it also authorizes us to reimpose the registrar to reimpose revocation when a licensee has probationary conditions placed on their license in lieu of a revocation. So if they do not meet those terms of probation, that revocation would be effective without a second hearing. And that is it for legislation for this year.
Thank you, Fauna. That concludes the legislative agenda for today's meeting. It is back to Board Chair Love.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, we had 7 bills, AB 143, 336, 968, 1204, Senate Bill 544, 601, and 630. And they were just for background. And Fauna provided an update on those 5 bills. And I believe, Michael, do you have 2 more bills required for vote?
There was one bill that needed the vote. The first bill was already signed by the governor.
Okay,
That was the trailer budget bill, so there was no action needed. So it was just the one vote.
just the one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Committee Chair Mark. And we'll next to Agenda Item F, Enforcement. For that, I'll turn the floor over to our Enforcement Committee Chair, Jim Ruane.
Thank you, Chair Love. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Rowan, the Enforcement Committee Chair. The Enforcement Program Statistical Update begins on page 80 of your board packet. Your packet includes a thorough statistical update. However, I will request Enforcement Chief Steve Grove to provide a couple of highlights at this time. Steve?
Thank you, Chair Ruane. I have 2 highlights of recent investigations I would like to share this morning, beginning on page 80 of your packet. The first case involves a former licensed general contractor, David Forkosh, whose license was revoked in 2006, but he continued to contract without a license, resulting in 10 criminal complaints filed by the CSLB investigators. The CSLB investigations resulted in multiple charges, including contracting without a license, illegal advertising, fraudulent use of another's contractor's license, theft by false pretenses, failure to secure workers' compensation insurance, and conspiracy. In June of 2023, Forkosh appeared in court in San Mateo County for a preliminary hearing. The hearing was rescheduled and took place on August 28th, and we're pleased to announce that Forkosh was held to answer on all counts. The next case I would like to highlight involves solar contractor Zenernet Installation Company, LLC. Their contractor's license was issued on December 20, 2021, and we received the first complaint against them the very next month. Over the next year and a half, the complaints continued coming in, reaching a total of 218. Allegations were that Zenernet was contracting for the installation of residential solar systems and leaving the projects in various stages of completion, ranging from no work done at all to completing the installation but not getting connection approval from the utility company. In one of the cases, the investigation established that Zenernet employed an unregistered salesperson to contract with a Fremont consumer to install a 17-panel solar system on his roof for over $48,000. Zenernet installed the equipment but failed to obtain the proper building permit or permission to operate from the local community or utility company. Therefore, the system was of no value to the consumer. Further, Zenernet received payment in full on the project from the consumer's finance company and then abandoned the project. Thanks to the quick work of our investigator and our case management staff, an accusation was filed, which resulted in the revocation of their contractor's license effective May 10, 2023. Although Zenernet ended up filing for bankruptcy protection, many of the victims received partial financial compensation through claims filed with the CSLB Solar Restitution Fund. More than $800,000 has been paid to the Zenernet victims out of the fund. In addition to the administrative case, a CSLB peace officer assigned to our Special Investigations Unit conducted an extensive criminal investigation involving 25 of the victims. The investigation has just recently been completed, and the case is in the process of being referred to the Criminal Division of the Attorney General's office. And that completes my highlights. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Continuing on with the statistical update, you will note at the top of page 80 some staffing information. Enforcement supervisors and managers continue to prioritize filling vacancies. Currently, there are 23 vacant positions, which is an approximate 10% vacancy rate. Interviews have been conducted and candidates selected for 6 of these vacant positions. On page 82, you will find complaint statistics. For the period of July 1st, 2022 to June 30, 2023, a total of 17,574 reactive complaints have been received, which is a considerable increase over the past 2 fiscal years. In contrast, the total number of complaints received in 2021 was 14,527, and the total number received in fiscal year 21-22 was 15,472. With current staffing levels, the optimum maximum enforcement division caseload is 4,635 pending complaints. As of July 31st, 2023, the pending caseload was 5,021. The major contributor to this increased caseload continues to be residential solar installation complaints, and a small number of contractors that are receiving an excessive number of complaints. You may recall a few years ago, CSLB was concerned about receiving 80 solar complaints per month. Unfortunately, solar complaints have averaged about 200 per month for the past year. Consumer Services representatives, CSR, and special investigators, SI, in the Enforcement Division are working very hard to keep up with the incoming complaints. The weighted monthly caseload average per special investigator in investigative centers remains steady at 9 closures per month, just shy of the closure goal of 10. Consumer Service representatives assigned to the 2 CSLB intake mediation centers have exceeded complaint handling expectations by mediating or resolving more than 20 complaints monthly. From July 2022 through June 2023, enforcement efforts have resulted in more than $36.9 million in restitution to financially injured parties. Another board goal is to the appropriate disposition of all but 100 complaints within 270 days of receipt. As of July 31st, 2023, 281 complaints exceeded 270 days in age. Enforcement supervisors continue to work closely with their staff and provide guidance during monthly case reviews in an effort to reduce the backlog of aged cases, and I am pleased to provide an update that at the end of August, cases exceeding 270 days in age were reduced to 206. You'll find information on page 83 regarding CSLB-sponsored arbitration and disciplinary action statistics. Let us know if you have any questions about these. And finally, I will provide a brief update on proactive enforcement, which is conducted by the 27 special investigators assigned to the Statewide Investigative Fraud Team, or SWIFT. This information begins on page 84 of your board packet. From July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, SWIFT conducted 27 undercover sting operations across the state. They participated in 346 sweep days and responded to 967 leads or tips received from industry and the public. Investigators closed 3,164 cases as a result of the operations, with 885 cases resulting in an administrative or criminal legal action. Additionally, over 1,199 advisory notices were issued for relatively minor violations. That concludes the enforcement program statistical update. And on page 87, you will find a training update. You may recall that CSLB's 5-day enforcement academies stopped per the pandemic. I am pleased to report staff has resumed the 5-day enforcement academies, with 30 staff attending last July, and the next academy is scheduled for October. This is an information-only item. No action is required by the board. Board members have any comments?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned that Zenernet, some of their customers received the restitution from the fund that we had. I'm assuming those complaints and the restitution was made prior to closing that fund.
Yes, where the fund is at right now is, for some background, we received a $5 million appropriation for solar consumers that had no recourse because their contractor had been revoked or was no longer viable. And so those consumers did receive $800,000 out of the fund. We were able to provide restitution to all Zenernet consumers that filed complaints prior to December 31st, 2022. We did cut the fund off at that time. We still have I should say, we're still looking at some of those claims, but I think most, if not all, the Zenernet consumers were made financially whole.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public in the room?
I have a comment,
sorry.
Chair Ruin. I want to comment on the training that was taking place. I was able to attend a portion of it and presented to the 30 individuals. What was wonderful was the excitement in the room to get some training, because as everyone understands, we have a large backlog of cases, but trainings like this will help us make sure that the backlog decreases, and everyone was very excited for the training. So I also want to make sure Enforcement Supervisor Jerry Hassan, he provided that training with 2 legal representatives from DCA or DHE's office, and they did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Michael. Anything else from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, thank you. Our final agenda item is F2, which is an update on the Consumer Satisfaction Survey. The update begins on page 89 of your board packet and includes the full report for the 22-23 fiscal year. Unfortunately, there has been an 18% decline overall in the survey results. Enforcement management is very concerned about this decline and are currently looking at ways to improve future survey results. For background into likely causes of the satisfaction reduction, I'll now provide some of the contributing factors in the survey decline and action taken by staff. For the board to remain financially solvent in 2020, the Enforcement Division was forced to implement the following complaint handling expense reduction strategies. Less egregious licensee complaints were referred to small claims court when settlement efforts were not successful. Staff reduced use of the industry expert in arbitration programs, and filling of enforcement positions was delayed. As reported by Budget Manager Stacy Paul, CSLB financial concerns have been resolved and the aforementioned expense reduction strategies have ceased. Another contributing factor likely relates to telework. To keep staff safe during the COVID pandemic, telework and remote investigations were encouraged. This resulted in fewer site visits and formal legal actions. CSLB special investigators are now required to report to an office a minimum of 2 days per week and have returned to performing site inspections. Another factor that has impacted the Enforcement Division's ability to respond promptly to consumer complaints has been the unprecedented amount of disaster recovery and local assistance centers which have opened over the past 12 months to aid flood, earthquake, and wildfire victims. A total of 54, primarily enforcement staff, were redirected to these 47 assistance centers. CSLB management recognizes the importance of staffing these assistance centers, but at the same time, it unfortunately takes away from the division's ability to respond to consumer complaints. CSLB management has entered into negotiations to provide assistance remotely when appropriate, and hiring temporary help will be considered to provide on-call assistance for future disasters. And finally, as previously reported, enforcement activities have resumed, and all staff will be receiving customer service training in the coming months. I have also requested Steve Groves schedule an enforcement committee meeting for October or November of 2023 to further discuss opportunities to improve consumer satisfaction. This concludes the enforcement program update. Are there any comments from board members? Any comments from the public in the room? That concludes the enforcement items on the agenda. Back to you, Chair Love.
Thank you, Chair Ruin. Next item on the agenda is item G, licensing. For that, I'll turn the floor over to our licensing committee chair, Alan Guy.
There we go. Thank you, Chair Love. Good morning. I am Alan Guy, Licensing Committee Chair, and I am providing the Licensing Division update today with assistance from Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon. You can find the licensing update on page 108. I will highlight a few items for the board. Regarding applications, the table on page 108 indicates the number of applications received. As you can see, CSLB has already received over 27,000 applications in the first 7 months of the year. This is comparable to the amount we had received last year at this time. On page 109, you can see that except for home improvement salesmen, adding new officers, and name change forms, all of our processing times are now below 3 weeks. At our last board meeting, processing times for all applicant types was between 3 and 4 weeks. This improvement means more timely handling of our applications and results in reduced wait times for calls to the call center. Please note the total number of renewals received in the table on page 111. They went down between calendar year 2021 and 2022, but are on track to rebound by the end of 2023. We have already received more than 71,000 renewals in the last 7 months. If we continue to average slightly more than 10,000 renewals a month, we are on track to rebound to 2021 numbers. Regarding the workers' compensation stats on page 112, since March of 2023, the number of contractors with workers' compensation policies has increased by 3%. We think this is a benefit of SB 216, which the board sponsored. On page 116, you will note an update regarding CSLB's License Application Experience Verification Program. As of last summer, the licensing division referred most of the experience investigations to the enforcement division. This year, investigators have completed an average of 25 applicant investigations each month. You can find the testing update on page 120. CSLB finished transitioning to PSI exams on July 1st, 2022. Between August 2022 and July 2023, PSI exams administered 43,497 exams for CSLB candidates. In addition, CSLB expanded to two new test centers on August 1st, 2023 in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Wilsonville, Oregon. Currently, there are no backlogs in test administration. As you can see on page 122, the Exam Development Unit has released 5 newly updated exams since April 1st, 2023. C17 glazing, C42 sanitation system, C46 solar, C53 swimming pool, and C54 ceramic and mosaic tile. Each of these new exams constitute an item bank of between 600 and 1,000 items. From those item banks, the exam specialists create versions of the exams to send out to the test centers. A version is a test form for a specific trade and has between 100 and 115 scored items. New versions for each of the 47 CSLB exams are sent to the test centers as often as every 2 months, depending on how many candidates take the exam. The exam specialists have created and sent 56 versions to PSI exam test centers in the last 3 months. Do any board members have any comments? Does the public have any comments?
I have a question through the chair. I think we heard earlier that most of the complaints are for solar, about solar contractors. I'm just wondering if the data from the enforcement complaints is tracked to use and update the tests. I know they're new tests, but just wondering, is there a highlighted focus on that test or exam?
Yes, we do. We do work with enforcement if there's issues brought up regarding to trade. The thing is, a lot of the issues that they're having in enforcement are with requiring a higher than allowed down payment, or having them pay their bill in full before the work is complete, or not pulling permits. That's addressed on the law and business exam. We do update that exam every 5 years as well. And so we do address it in that exam, but the solar exam is more for the trade work. So it's addressed, it's just not necessarily addressed in the solar exam, the issues that they are having. Does that help?
Thank you. Any public comment? All right, moving on to applicant survey results. The annual applicant survey results start on page 123. CSLB has sent this survey to recently licensed contractors each month since February 2020. As you can see, the responses are mostly positive, with 82% indicating the licensing process was easy to understand and 74% indicating that the time frame was acceptable. In addition, 87% reported that they were treated courteously by CSLB's representatives. Do any board members have any comments? Does the public have any comments? All right, item 3, exam translation update. There's an update on exam translation beginning on page 133. As of August 1st, 2023, PSA exam began administering the law and business exam in Spanish at its test centers. 9 more trade exams will follow over the next few months, and I would like to invite Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon to comment about the translation project.
Thank you. So staff researched how often each trade exam received a request for Spanish translator over the last 20 years. The 9 most often requested trades were chosen for translation along with a law and business exam, and these trades are listed in your board packet. When candidates submit their application, they can let CSLB know if they would like to use a translator for their exam. Those who select Spanish and one of these trades will be assigned to take the trade exam and law and business exam using the translated versions at the test centers. Candidates who have applied for a different trade will still be able to request a translator for that trade, and then they'll take their law and business exam using the Spanish translated version. The benefit is it's going to speed up their scheduling time to take their exams because they don't have to wait for a translator room to be available.
Thank you, Chief. Staff is researching having various letters and other standard CSLB correspondence regarding licensure translated into Spanish as well. As of September 11th, the bond and fee letter has already been translated and will be programmed for use in the next few months. Do we have any board member comments? Do we have any public comment? All right, item 4, C49 tree and palm trade exam. On page 136, you can find information about the new C49 tree and palm trade. The CSLB created this new classification to ensure that licensees are tested on health and safety protocols in the tree service industry. The board approved development of the C49 classification at the April 2018 board meeting. The Office of Administrative Law approved the regulation on March 30th, 2022, to create this new C specialty license under CSLB's jurisdiction. The new C49 tree and palm trade licensees will be able to plant, maintain, and remove trees and palms. The most significant difference will be that the C49 classification will require a trade exam. The new classification is effective January 1st, 2024. Licensing Chief Carol Gagnon can speak briefly on this new trade.
So all C49 applicants will be required to take and pass the new C49 trade exam as well as a law and business exam to receive their license. After December 31st, 2023, applicants can no longer apply for the C61, the D49 tree service class. People who apply before this date will continue with their application. All D49 applications received on or after January 1, 2024 will be converted to C49 applications and take both the trade and the law and business exam.
Thank you. That concludes the licensing and testing update. Carol and I are available if the board has any questions. Are there any comments from the public? Back to you, Chair Love.
Thank you, Chair Guy. Next on the agenda is item H, Public Affairs. For that, we turn to our Public Affairs Committee Chair, Miguel Garza.
Thank you, Chair Love. I'm pleased to bring you the Public Affairs update today, which will start on page 140 of your pamphlet. The Public Affairs Office, or hereforth known as the PAO, is responsible for media and industry licensing and consumer communications, as well as outreach. They provide a proactive public relations, responding to media inquiries, and develop and distribute publications and newsletters. They also conduct educational and outreach for consumers and contractors. PAO creates content for CSLB's social media channels and websites, including webcasts and videos. They conduct workshops, seminars for disaster survivors and contractors, and present speeches to service groups and organizations. Disaster response is a key part of CSLB's outreach efforts over the past few years. CSLB works to educate property and business owners as they are not harmed by unlicensed and/or unscrupulous contractors after a disaster. Between May 1st and June 31st of 2023, CSLB staff and I participated in 7 disaster recovery centers, or DRR centers, throughout California. A list of these DRCs are provided on page 140. In the area of video and digital service, PAO has focused on creating informative videos for consumers, licensees, and applicants. These videos cover topics such as Construction Safety Week, and update on what to expect on test dates, referring the process through examination and the administrative vendor PSI exams. The videos are shared on YouTube and other social medias and archived on the CSLB website. PAO has also prioritized translations in producing Spanish language consumer and industry videos. You can see a list of the live and recorded videos on page 142. On page 143, PAO has helped increase CSLB's following on social media by improving engagement with applicants, licensees, the news media, and other stakeholders. CSLB maintains an active presence on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and in LinkedIn. All platforms have shown growth. On page 147, PAO shows an updated subscriber list of more than 171,000. In my book, that's an influencer. This is much larger number than reported in previous meetings, as it also includes the licensees and information servicers. This licensee information servicers was used in early August when PAO distributed the first Contractors newsletter in more than 2 years. The subscribers list also gets a CSLB's industry bulletins and press releases out to stakeholders. 2 industry bulletins have been issued since May. 7 newsletter releases have been issued in the same time period, including one in June about the National Association of State Contractor Agencies nationwide enforcement targeting unlicensed activities. PAO responded to 24 media inquiries between May 1st and July 31st, and the media coverage has focused on various topics, including sting operation results, solar scams, and complaint against contractors. On page 148, it shows the outreach events that CSLB has attended between May and July, including a senior scam stopper seminar that I presented in June with Assemblyman Alex Lee's office. The Public Affairs Office also writes and publishes contents for internal communications. As you would note on page 149, you'll see that the PAO has published 10 employee Intertran articles between May and July, highlighting employee and organizational accomplishments, providing access to forms, policies, reports, and other important information for CSLB staff, including the recent transition to Microsoft Teams calling. The Intertran is accessible to all CSLB employees around the state, and the first thing that they see when they open up their web browser in their work computers. Finally, on page 150, CSLB's Public Information Center has been improving waiting times for callers. Not noted in this package is that the wait times went further down in August, with wait times averaging less and or around 7 minutes. This is an informational item only, and it requires no action from the board. Do any board members have any questions? Seeing and hearing none, are there any public comments? And seeing and hearing none, Chair Love, this concludes my report.
I'm on now. Thank you. Thank you for that report. At this time, we are going to take a break for lunch and then go into closed session. So thank you all for coming today, those of you who may have to leave, and those of you who stay, we will see you perhaps later. Thank you.